As of August of 2012, there was a new script generated regarding cell phones. This again persists to be the most persistent problem with test administration, especially since almost every student has cell phones at this point. This is the script that teachers need to read at least twice prior to the exam in terms of what they should not have in their possession. It is also important that teachers put their own cell phones away during the test administration to model this behavior as well. If students should be checked when they come into the room to make sure that they don't have these devices on them, but often students manage to get them in anyways. If a student is found with one of these devices while taking the exam, they must be directed to turn it over to the proctor or the monitor immediately. Because there are procedural due process rights that students have, the student should be allowed to complete the exam, but the incident should be reported promptly to the school principal or administrator. And if the principal or administrator determines that the student had this prohibited device and does their own investigation on this in his or her possession during the test administration, the student's test must be invalidated and no score can be calculated for that student. Additionally, this incident will have to be reported in writing to the Office of State Assessment for any other testing irregularity. So again, some students with disabilities can have certain recording or playback or assistive technology devices if they're outlined on their IEP or 504 plan. Again, that's a different situation. This is most important. No one under any circumstances, including the student, may alter a student's response on a test once the student has handed in his or her test materials. So if any teacher or administrator who engages in inappropriate conduct with respect to administering and or scoring these state exams can be subject to disciplinary actions in accordance with sections 3020 and 3020A of education law, or actions against their certification pursuant to Part 83 of the regulations of the Commissioner of Education. Additionally, it's important these days that tests really are not discussed electronically, so you're really not encouraged at all to discuss test questions or other specific test content with others online or via email or on a listserv or on Facebook. The discussion, again, for Regents exams, they're not as secure. Once they're given, it's not like the New York State 3 through 8 exams where those questions themselves are considered secure, but it's just not a good practice to engage in. Obviously, during scoring, scorers have to discuss test questions in order to score properly. Again, test booklets cannot be opened prior to the distribution of tests to students. The only exception for this would be for proctors who have to administer tests either individually or in a small group to students with disabilities. And they have to read those test booklets. They are allowed to have those booklets prior to the test administration time to be able to read through them and familiarize themselves with the content. Typically, this is within an hour before the start time. They can be given these materials to get themselves ready. Some examples of security breaches or testing irregularities include opening test materials prior to the actual date of administration, a teacher coming in and giving impromptu lessons on specific test content either immediately before or during the actual test administration, changing a student's response on test papers, providing students with test accommodations that aren't on their IEP, above and beyond what are on their IEPs, and also not providing the test accommodations that students should be having. Students' use of cell phones during the test administration, confirmed cases of student cheating, and any tests administered outside the state's designated testing dates. Regents' testing dates are very rigid. There's no makeup period. You can't give a test the following day to a student. There are cases where the students might need to take more than one exam, and those are typically handled with a conflict room. In March 2012, the Board of Regents supported a recommendation to create a new division called the Test Security Unit. Some of their responsibilities include directly investigating cases involving serious allegations and more aggressively pursuing Part 83 moral character cases where appropriate, instituting a new state-of-the-art intake and data gathering system, and supporting local districts and BOCES the need to conduct investigations. They primarily deal with investigations around adult behaviors or questionable behaviors around testing. So again, they would deal more directly with any suspected cases of tampering with students' test papers or engaging in any acts prior to, during, or after testing that are questionable. In the event of a suspected security breach or testing irregularity, please contact your school administrator immediately for review. School administrators should in turn contact Joyce Schultz, Director of Testing, as soon as possible to review the incident and determine the next steps. All the resources identified with the January 2014 Regents administration period are identified on this page with links to those. In addition, there are specific directions for administering RCTs, which many of you will be doing, and those directions are also already included on the links on this slide. The most important thing is, even despite reading everything that you read or you viewing this PowerPoint, if the morning of the test, during, if something comes up during the test that you really have a concern about, it's important, especially if you have two proctors in the room, to be able to reach an administrator to clarify any situation that you might have questions on. That's one of the beauties of having two proctors in the room, is that there's always someone to continue on with the proctoring duties. I hope everyone has a successful Regents Week. Thank you.